Hello, Professor Acabado. My name is Mikey, and our group did our presentation on Spanish Philippines. For our narrow focus, we decided to focus more on Spanish Catholicism and how that affected the Philippines. I will be presenting this poster with Jeremiah.
Hello, my name is Jeremiah Martinelli, and welcome to my part of the presentation. I'm going to be covering Magellan, Legazpi, folk Catholicism, and Santo Niño. So starting off with Magellan, this was the first Spanish expedition to the Philippines from March to April of 1521. Cebuanos, this was their first encounter of Catholicism. Raja Humaban and his wife Hara established the civil connection with Magellan, and in turn the two, along with about 800 Cebuanos were baptized on April 14, 1521. He ended up being murdered by King Lapu-Lapu, one of the few datus who showed opposition to Raja Humabon and the relation with Spain. Moving forward to Legazpi, he arrived on Cebu in 1565 with 5 Augustinian friars. He formed the first European settlement in Cebu, and he and his men found a statue of baby Jesus in a burnt hut. This is thought to be the Santo Niño statue.
The encomienda system was a labor system in the Spanish colonies that rewarded the conquerors with the labor of the inhabitants of the land that they took. The Spaniards believed that, in return for slavery, they were giving back to the natives by converting them to Catholicism. Encomiendas, or grants, were given to certain Spaniard individuals. These individuals became known as encomenderos. These encomiendas were bestowed by the Spanish king and the governor-general in Manila to people who have exhibited worthiness to the Spanish crown. These were multi-generational appointments that lasted for up to 3 generations in the Philippines. This basically created a class system of the owners and the laborers in the Philippines. Similar to capitalism, encomenderos would help collect taxes or tributes from the local population. One of the laws that encomenderos were forced to abide by was to help Spanish missionaries convert the local population to Catholicism. Moreover, encomenderos were expected to protect the native population by law. Nevertheless, some encomenderos did not follow the laws put in by the Spanish monarchy. They abused their powers and excessively collected taxes. Additionally, the church held influence over the Spanish government, which meant that any adversary of the church was also considered an adversary of the state. This puts into perspective the magnitude of Catholicism in the Philippines. The Spanish priests had power over the Filipino priests, which shows the hierarchical relationship between the two governments. All in all, the encomienda system was a slave system which was responsible for converting the Philippines to Catholicism. Religion was used as a weapon for social control. It was used to make the indigenous people obedient to Spanish rule.
Moving forward to folk Catholicism, Filipinos were able to adapt to Catholicism in their own way, since their concerns regarding livelihood, prosperity, healing, and safety were relevant to church rituals. This unique relationship between the Philippines culture and Christianity that differs from Christian theology, allowed Filipinos to preserve their own culture while integrating Christianity. Moreover, Catholicism encouraged and empowered Filipinos to resist colonial powers. For instance, when the natives were introduced to the narrative about the suffering of Christ, they related the narrative to themselves suffering from the Spanish colonizers. Regarding Santo Niño, this was the first Filipino encounter with Catholicism, and it was through Magellan's expedition in 1521. Like we said, Magellan first arrived in Cebu in 1521. He gifted the Raja of Cebu the Santo Niño statue at the baptism of Raja Humabon and his wife Ara about 800 years, and around 800 Cebuanos, on April 14th, 1521. The Santo Niño was a gift for their conversion to Christianity/Catholicism, and this marks the first Filipinos to be Christianized. There are also other origin stories of the Santo Niño. According to Cebuano, there are multiple origin stories for Santo Niño regarding a charred piece of wood that would later resemble the features of a child. Some of these stories involve the Spanish arriving on the island and appropriating the charred piece of wood to be a part of the Catholic Church. which eventually turned him into a Catholic deity. And then the Santo Nino is a symbol of a narrative, counter narrative at the end of the 16th century that denies Spanish Catholicism. Many Christianized Filipinos worship the Santo Nino, placing significant spiritual meaning on the object itself. One example of the celebration of the Santo Nino is the festival of Sinulag in Cebu. They celebrate the gifting of the Santo Nino from Magellan and the first instance of Christianization. However, many of the festivities of the celebration include a dance that predates Spanish Catholicism, a dance that was done often to honor animist idols of the time. The worshipping of the Santo Nino makes it a powerful object, directly reflecting many indigenous religions' animist beliefs. And then, Anting is the amulet or talisman. I forgot the word. It brings protection, health, and prosperity. And then it's still used by Catholics, but predates Catholicism. So yeah, that's my part of the presentation regarding Spanish Catholicism as colonialism. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll give it back to Mike.
Our next topic is Spanish Catholicism from a paracolonial lens. Paracolonialism, as coined by Professor Acabado, is the study of certain groups who are not directly colonized, but show a parallel culture change with the groups who were directly colonized. For example, the Ifugao people were affected by Catholicism despite not being directly colonized. Half of all Ifugaos became Christian, and they held animist beliefs combined with Christian beliefs. They basically mashed their indigenous belief system with the Spanish belief system. The Ifugaos have traditionally believed that their lives were ruled by spirits, or anitos. Many Ifugaos still believe that the universe is divided into 5 levels. At the top is number 1, the heavens, which itself has 4 superimposed heavens. Beneath it is 2, Hugao, the known land. Below is the underworld, and there's also the world upstream and the world downstream. Each area has a large number of spirits, each of which has a name and belongs to one of 35 categories. Among them are ones associated with hero ancestors, diseases, omens, messengers, or celestial bodies. And this is a picture of the Ifugaos right here on our poster. The next topic is the Spanish Philippines class system. Many Catholic communities, aka Catholic orders, including the Augustinians, Dominicans, and Recollects, had large plots of land as a result of the encomienda system, as well as what's called haciendas, or large estates/plantations. They controlled the largest tract of land throughout the Philippines. They rented these plots of land to tenant farmers and taught them the Catholic religion and way of life. As you can see, this is a class system of renters and tenants, like we have in capitalism. The massive amounts of land they held, as well as the massive incomes they were making as a result of renting the plots out, made the Spanish Catholic orders and friars the wealthiest and most powerful people in Philippine society. They also blocked all the efforts of the local Filipino priests to grow on their own, as they wanted all of the authority to remain in the hands of the Spanish. The Spanish Catholic Church held hegemonic power in the Philippines, which means they were much more powerful than anyone else and would not let anyone else, aka the native priests, even test the boundaries of their power. In the Spanish Philippines, there was also a colonial caste system based on race. Here are all the racial classifications in order from what was classified as most superior to least superior. You have the Peninsulares, Americano, Filipino, Tornatras, Mestizo de Español, Mestizo de Sangli, Negrito, and Indio. But the most important classifications were, at the top, the Filipinos, which at the time meant the whites, the mixed race people, aka the mestizos, and the indigenous people, aka the Indios. These were legal classifications that were used for taxes. The Filipinos paid no tax, and Manila was segregated by race and religion. For example, in some areas were the Christians, and in other areas were those who were unchristianized. Though this racial caste system was abolished when Spain lost its colony, the racism, colorism, and classism it created still remain today. As you can see, the Spanish-Filipino class system saw economic levels, relationship to the means of production, race, and religion all intertwined. These 4 aspects all overlap to create class. These are the sources that we used for this presentation. All right, next up we have our discussion questions. Question 1, what impact do the Spaniards have on the Philippines today? The Catholic religion is central to the way of life in the Philippines today, and remnants of the class system still linger. For example, something that I and many other Filipinos have experienced in our lives is colorism. If you have light skin or a pointy nose or any feature that resembles whiteness, I'm sure you had family members say to you, "Oh, you look so mestizo," as a compliment, as if to say looking white is good and looking indigenous Filipino is bad. This is an example of the white supremacy that Spanish colonialism left ingrained into Filipino culture. Also, many Filipinos have skin whitening soap because they desire light skin. This is because if you were white, you were seen as upper class, whereas if you had dark skin, you were seen as lower class, because that was the actual legal classification in the Philippines. And the wealth inequality of the colonial times still remains. Question 2. Despite Catholicism being used as a weapon for colonization in the Philippines, can Spanish Catholicism be viewed from a decolonizing lens? Explain. And question 3. How does viewing Spanish Philippines from a paracolonial lens contribute to the decolonization and emphasize individual populations of the Philippines? Looking back on Professor Acabado's writings, we can remember that the long history theory of the Ifugao rice terraces contributes to the colonialist narrative because it paints the picture that the Ifugaos were unchanging for thousands of years. And this paints a picture that they only changed or advanced when the white people came in. And that is a racist narrative. So I think looking at Spanish Catholicism in this way and seeing that some Ifugaos were Christianized shows us that they are not unchanging. They are advanced enough to make the rice terraces themselves. All in all, it is essential to learn about Spanish Philippines if we want to truly understand the Philippines, as the Philippines began as a colonial project. The Spaniards and the Catholicism they brought was responsible for creating the culture of the Philippines we know today, including the racism, colorism, and classism that still persists. Thank you.